Welcome to this episode of the Movie Geeks United Oscar series. Fiona Crombie just received her first nomination for her outstanding production design in The Favorite. In this conversation, we chat with Miss Crombie about the challenges of crafting a period piece on a budget, how her sets were designed to reflect and define character, and her collaborations with other members of the crew in molding a consistent look for the film.
How does it feel to be an Oscar nominee?
It feels fantastic to be an Oscar nominee. I'm very happy, and I'm a bit weary today. It was quite a big day yesterday. But yeah, I'm delighted.
It's always interesting to me how people find their passions in life. And I'm wondering how this field of work, production design, how it suited you and how you fell into it.
Well, my father was a film director in Australia, and so I was raised, I can't say I was raised on film sets. I didn't go to them all the time, but I was certainly taken out onto location, and I saw the way that my father worked. I saw this kind of, community of people making something, and I always thought that was really interesting, and I was always fascinated by the sets and costumes. Actually, I was always just sort of seeing the kind of artifice, walking behind and seeing how something wasn't real, or going inside houses and finding that their internal structure was how all of that stuff it was really magical to me. So I don't think I ever thought, I'm going to be a production designer when I grow up or anything like that. But I remember it was a world that was quite captivating. And I loved hearing my father, and my mother was in the film industry as well. I loved hearing them talk about film. And then it just, it carried on.
Yeah. And this work that you've done for The Favorite, it's just, first of all, it's an astounding movie, and I believe your work is such an essential part of what makes it such an exceptional film. But this is such a unique project because, it's not some stodgy costume drama. It's very outside the box. So I'm curious how that approach dictated your work on the film.
Yeah, I really think that everything comes down to what's written on the page. It's a combination, really. It depends so much on the director, but also I really feel that the words that were written just immediately led me to a place where I knew that I had creative freedom, that we weren't going to make something that was, it was, in a way, it's sort of slightly dishonoring the past, and it's playful, and, it's all of that was in the words. It's in the phrasing, the way that the dialogue is written. It's in scripted elements that we knew didn't exist. And so that just meant that we could really play with things and turn them on their head, without kind of making it. We also didn't want it to feel like it was, I didn't want it to feel like it wasn't real. I wanted for people to, feel that everything we were doing was, true and consistent with the world that we were creating. So nothing was going to pop out and clash. But, I don't know if that makes any sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And I'm sure it felt kind of like a delicate balance, because this is, like I said, this is a film that is not typical for this genre, just the tone of it. And yet you don't, like you said, you don't want to distract. But I understand that a lot of your visual inspirations that you called upon were not necessarily from this period.
No, there were really two threads. So we did absolutely look at what was correct for the period, and we looked at, styles of furniture and styles of, different sorts of fabrics. And so we sort of understood that. And we certainly looked at a lot of architectural illustrations and a lot of painting. And we looked at those for things like the floral arrangement, tableware, all those little details. But we also looked at contemporary photography. We looked at, all manner of different things. When I start a project, I always cast quite a wide net. I work with a visual researcher, and we really try to put together almost like an emotive response, like an initial impulse response at the very beginning. And I find that through that you kind of find recurring themes, whether it's colour palette or, approach to space or, certain things just, like, in other words, I start to repeat myself with the pictures that I find. And that's sort of what happened with this one, yeah.
So the kind of monochromatic color palette that you went with, was that developed early?
Do you know what, that actually developed? It was certainly during pre-production, and in many ways that was a reaction to speaking to Sandy Powell and Yorgos and understanding that they wanted to go that way with the costume. And then that led me to thinking about how my part in this would have to, everything needs to sit together, and it's that kind of cohesion that I was talking about before, that you want to make sure that you feel like everything sits within the same universe in a way. And so we decided the best approach was to be, really minimal with our colors, like really, so we only used gold fabrics, and we were very, we only used wooden furniture and inlaid furniture, and, sort of, we kept the palette very tight. And we were also warm. We went with warm colors to sort of sit next to Sandy so that there was they sat away from what was going on in the background. And I think it was it was sort of an impulse, and I'm so glad we did it, because there's sort of an economy to the way that the film looks. It's not too, it's not too busy. It's busy because of the scale and the way that the rooms are, but it's not overwhelming. It's not distracting.
Yeah, and like you said, I think a lot of the color, the really color in the film is from the performances, and some of the more extreme behavior. So I think if you had a setting that mirrored that, it would just take away from those central performances.
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, what's really beautiful about those people is their silhouette as well. You're looking at these fantastic shapes, whether it's wigs and, or the shapes of the garments. And, we want to frame. I always want to frame performance and frame actors. I don't want to distract from that at all. Yeah.
And you had mentioned Sandy Powell, and it's a question I had, because I would think the work that you do is so intrinsic and complementary to the work of the costume designer, the work of the cinematography, how it's shot.
Yeah.
So can you give me a sense of what that collaboration is throughout the process for you, between you and the other disciplines?
Well, I think what the main thing is that we just have to always share our discoveries. And so, when Sandy hit upon something that she thought would work really well, she would share it with us, and, we would do the same. And so we would always be communicating, sending samples, sending references, and, we visited her workroom and we would look at, her samples and what she was doing. And then with Robbie, there was a lot of, just conversation about approach. Like, it was really important for the art department to really facilitate the movement, to make sure there was space and that there was a way, because the movement of the camera is so important in the film. So we had to really think about that, how to, we weren't really interested in putting too much furniture in anyway, because there's something lovely about an enormous spare space. Mm-hmm. But, so we talked about, just allowing for camera movement. But also then when we did camera tests, that was really informative, because we saw not only, what we needed to give Robbie for lighting, we had to light the film with candles, but also just how much we were going to see of the spaces and how they were going to operate the camera really helped us know what we needed to deliver.
That is another interesting, that this was made much like a Barry Lyndon. It was made in large part by candlelight.
Yeah.
And I would think that candlelight, well, I know it does. It illuminates surroundings much differently than natural light or a light bulb. So that I'm sure you had to take that into account too when determining the color palette.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the thing I really felt strongly that we should always keep the floors bare. So we took away, and that was for an impulse that was to do with not ever making them feel too plush. I like the idea of the floors having a hardness and a sheen, and again, that's bouncing light. And so we always, that all the furniture has a kick. So we're trying to get kicks off surfaces. We have mirrors in the room, and again, that's kicking light. And the huge fireplaces, we use them all the time, and they're all light sources. And so we did look for opportunities. It's like, with Sandy with her costumes, it's her fabrics. They just have a slight sheen. They're going to pick up something and have interest for the camera. And so we did look for ways to, capitalize on the candlelight, and just so that it would bounce off. Yeah.
Is there, if you were to teach a class on production design, is there a particular set or scene in this film that you would call upon to impart some kind of lesson?
Oh, I think that probably in many ways, I think the thing that was interesting about working in a location like Hatfield House, which is where we shot the Queen's bedchamber and Sarah's bedchamber, and is that, what we had to do was we had to capitalize on what was on offer from that house, and then work out how to bring it into our story. So it was quite a nice discipline to walk around and work, look at that place and think, okay, what works for us and what doesn't. We didn't have a lot of money on the film, and so we had to be clever about where to put our resources. And I think that is what I would teach, a class. It's like, work out what your assets are and then embellish them. So if, for example, there's beautiful wood paneling at Hatfield House, we replicated it, we brought it into Sarah's bedroom, and we built walls. Then when we built the secret passageway, again, we're replicating joinery, which means that you can't tell where my sets begin and end. It all feels like a continuous, environment. And I think that way it feels bigger and it feels whole, So yeah, that would be, it's kind of economy in a way.
Yeah, and you are a master of it, because if you take into account the very opulent look of this film, you would think you guys were budgeted much more generously than you were.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know. It was, it's a small budget. We had, around 1.3 million pounds, which, the thing is that it was enough because we did it. So you can't say it wasn't enough, but it meant that we had to be, we couldn't waste anything. We had to be very careful with what we were spending money on and really, believe in it. And things were stretched. Like by the time we were doing some of the, we were building the spa set, it was stretched. We were worrying about, can we pull this off? So, we just got there in the end.
Yeah. And I'm sure the one thing that all filmmakers feel like they need more of is time and money. I don't think everyone I don't think anyone says, man, I have far too much time to shoot this movie and far too much money.
No, I think that's the thing that's so kind of interesting about filmmaking is this constant, there's like competing tensions all the time. And it means that it kind of, whatever comes out of it is always interesting.
Could you just give me a sense of, looking at the characters of this film, how you work to modify your designs to define the contrasts between these characters?
Yeah, I think the main thing was with Queen Anne. Her bedchamber has it's often in flux. It's quite a changeable space, and furniture moves, the bed is unmade. Like it has a real life to that room because she's in it a lot. Like she's really, she, can't really get in and out easily. She needs to be helped all the time. And so I really liked that space had a fluidity to, and a changeability depending on her mood, whether she was playful, like with the lobster race or, whatever. Like it has, it changes. And Sarah's is more, it's a much straighter space in a way. Like it's never messy. Like it's very, she's very tidy. It also doesn't feel necessarily like it's personal to her, that room. It's like she's a visitor in a way. Mm-hmm. I really loved making Abigail's bedroom. We built that at the bottom of the stairs in an empty room at Hatfield House, and got a really subtle little growth to it. It starts off as just a very simple bare room, and by the time she's married, she's managed to gather little bits and pieces, glassware and little trays of biscuits, and she's got bedding, and she's kind of feathered her nest. And so that was really nice and then of course she graduates to upstairs. But so it was really lovely, making the whole way through. We did plot sort of transitions, and it was to do with Queen Anne's room. We often were looking at what was her state of mind, what was her health, how is that reflected in the food that's on the trays, along the side tables. What are her flowers like? Who's in control? So when it was Abigail, it's more frivolous. So we did make our own little we charted our own paths just so that we felt like there was movement within the spaces that, most people will never notice, but they might feel it somehow.
Yeah, absolutely. I know you're very busy. You're swamped with interviews and whatnot, and because of you're part of the Oscar season now. You're an official part of it.
Yeah.
So I won't take up too much of your time. I just have one more question for you, and it's about
no problem.
Working in period just in general, because you've become very adept at doing that. Your next film is The King, which by the stills that I've seen of the movie definitely looks like a period piece. And I'm wondering if you kind of relish the opportunity to do something more temporary, if you're going to be on the lookout for something more modern.
I would love to. It's interesting because my first, few years of working as a production designer, it was all contemporary. And then with Macbeth, I was given the opportunity of doing period film, and then from there it kind of has continued. And also living in England now, that gives you more opportunity to work in period film. I do miss contemporary. I really do. There's something kind of fantastic about doing these period films with scale, and there's something really foreign, and you have to learn about history and art and architecture, and that's really interesting. But I also really love small details. I like what's under the bed. I like the keys on the, what is the key ring? Yeah. What's the phone case? All of the things that give you hints about who that character is. I would love to do some of that again, yeah.